Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. Featured on today's episode are three artists, including myself, in recovery, carrying a message of hope for those struggling with addiction and substance abuse are Miki Mathioudakis, Kevin Caraher, and Stephen McCoy. Join me now as I go on the aisle to converse with Miki, Kevin, and Stephen. Well, guess who's here? Three of my oldest, dearest friends. Welcome to Kevin, Stephen, and Miki. So happy you could join me today for On the Aisle with yours truly. Okay, so let's talk about how we all know each other. Kevin, start with you.
I know you from Channel 6 originally. You used to be a producer, director down there back in the day. And I knew you dabbled in some theater back then, too, at the Phoenix occasionally. Mm-hmm. And I'd see you in shows there occasionally. But that's pretty much how I know you.
And Stephen?
Well, we've known each other for about probably 15 years now. And we met, which I think we're going to talk about later, about in recovery, right? And then, you know, have been an arts administrator and been around the arts for a long time. And you are around the arts as well a lot. So we've interfaced a lot in that world, too.
Mm-hmm. And Becky?
I think we met when I was in my 20s. So that was many years ago at the Broad Ripple Playhouse. Yeah. And I believe we imbibed too much alcohol together once upon a time. So
did we ever?
Yeah. And then you produced a piece called A Woman's Story about a woman in alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And I've just known you through the years and appreciate your friendship and the work that you do.
Well, the reason we're all gathered here today is to talk about, and you kind of teased, Stephen, recovery and addiction, and both of which we experienced addiction, all of us, that's what we have in common, besides the fact that we're all artists. And I thought, wouldn't it make a great show if I were to gather together some people who get sober, clean for a while, and since we're all artists, that's something I don't know that anybody has explored in depth. Only like we can talk about. Mm-hmm. And it's an issue that has been around for all the time, I would suspect. People who have addiction problems, and not just artists, but my theory is that for many, they think it's comes with the territory. Most artists are tortured, depressed, screwed up, messed up. In many cases, that's pretty true, as we and I can attest to. Yeah. But this show is not in any way, it is in no way meant to be a recruitment tool for 12-step work. I just would like for us to talk about our own personal experience and how it was that we got clean and sober, and how we have been able to use what we've learned in recovery to become better artists, because I think that's a message that we want to get out there. And, there's such a thing that people believe the only way you can stay sober is to do service with addicts and alcoholics. Mm-hmm. But I think we can all agree that it's been the arts that have also played a prominent part. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. So I'd love to hear a little bit about each of your story, if you would. And let's start with Miki.
Oh, gosh. I'm in a show right now, and we were talking backstage, and I said, I was arrested twice before I was 21 for driving under the influence. But do you think that ever stopped me for a minute? No. I waited until when I got sober the first time, a therapist put me on antabuse, and 2 weeks before my 1 year sober, I quit taking antabuse so I could celebrate by getting drunk. That's how I was going to celebrate being sober a year. So, right. That's kind of alcoholic behavior. Yeah. And Tim Lauder saw me the next day. And I was a remorseful, hungover basket case. And he took me to my first day.
Tom Lauder is no longer with us, but he was at the time a really well-known, popular, really talented actor, director. He worked for the Civic Theater at the time. So for those who don't know who he was, most of us who were around at that time, he was revered, wasn't he?
He sure was.
And he also, quote, carried the message, but in a way that was very subtle.
Yes. Because he later directed a play after I'd gone back out. And there were times he was not happy with me. And, you know, he was very honest about communicating. And I think that's one of the gifts of sobriety, is being able to be more open and honest, as opposed to under the influence of alcohol. You know, I think it's in the 4th step, they talk about we are egomaniacs with inferiority complexes. And that really kind of hit me.
Stephen, how about you?
Well, you know, when I was growing up, so I sort of have these intersecting things going on. I'm gay. So, and growing up, I, you know, discovered that really when I was in kindergarten, I kind of understood how different I was. I just felt different from everybody. I mean, I just had that thought all the time. And music and the arts really saved me from that. It was built community, and that was really important to me back then. And then when I got into high school, things got better and all that. But I was in choir and band and anything I could get my hands on music-wise or performing arts-wise. So then fast forward to college, I dated someone that was in the program. And so that kind of kept me sober there for my college years, amazingly. But as soon as I got out, I again just felt those feelings of loneliness and not having community. And I found that community with other LGBTQ folks that were also probably drinking too much, right? And alcohol really was honestly great for me in the beginning. I mean, I have some social anxiety and took that social anxiety away. And it helped me find this other community as well. But soon it became an issue. And I was, you know, fast forward, you know, a few years, and I was drinking in the morning just to stop the shakes, and, you know, getting home and getting drunk and just getting to the point where I would just be wasted. So I'd have to deal with the rest of the day. Definitely not dealing with my emotions, but still keeping things together in a weird way too. Like still being able to sort of spin the plates and keep it all together. But it finally just got to a point where, you know, I stopped going into work. Problems were everywhere for me, and I just couldn't solve them all. So I went into treatment and it came out, and, you know, I would like to say that all my problems went away, but I still had to deal with those problems. But it was great because I think, you know, going to treatment and getting into the rooms just gave me a different perspective. And I think that perspective of gratitude has just really helped me out so much. Because it allows you to look at any problems you have as learning opportunities and be grateful for those things, and then look at the world around you. And the LGBTQ community, you know, that kind of helped me get into active addiction, helped me to get out of that as well, because I found that community of sober LGBTQ folks, which was amazing too. So the arts sort of like saved me early on in life, and then the LGBTQ community helped me as well. And I've really I'm so grateful, right? That, and so I've sort of dedicated my life to the arts and to our community as well. And I'm grateful that I'm able to do that. So that's kind of my brief story.
Before we go on further, I emphasized early on, you know, we all have a connection to 12-step programs, and in respect to the traditions, we're not going to name that organization, but we can't help but talk about our experience. Right. We don't make reference to the rooms, the program, all those things. Just take for granted, those of you listening out there, that our experience with 12-step work has played an invaluable part in our staying sober, in addition to art. Okay, so Kevin, tell me your story.
Okay, well, when you were asking us to tell our stories, One of the first things that came to mind was one of my favorite TV series that's produced by Canadian television was Slings and Arrows. And one of my favorite lines in that series is one of the actors asked another actor, how do you deal with rejection? And the answer was alcohol. That's how I deal with it. And that's how I dealt with it for a long time. But I think for the longest time that when I would get cast in shows, I would always see it as a right instead of a privilege, and it is a privilege when you get cast in a show and you have to treat it respectfully. But I was not doing that a lot of times. My addiction got to the point where I would show up for rehearsals drunk sometimes. And then you get blackballed from certain groups for showing up at rehearsals. And you'd always wonder, well, why won't they cast me? Why won't they cast me? The answer is obvious. They don't want you showing up drunk. They don't want you performing drunk. But the miracle of the program is that by working the program and learning the principles and applying them to everyday life, I got to a point where after several years, I was able to make my amends with one of these groups. And lo and behold, the miracle happened. I'm getting cast again with this group. So that's the miracle of the program, that you can turn your life around by practicing the principles that we learn.
And Miki, tell people about your career outside of recovery.
Oh,
what did you do to make a living?
Well, I was a freelance human being. I'd gone to seminary because I felt some kind of calling to the unchurched, whatever that means. And I knew that, there were a lot of people in the arts community who, for one reason or another, didn't have a connection with a faith practice or a group because they'd been excluded for one reason or another. So I was in seminary, graduated from seminary.
Where was that, by the way?
Christian Theological Seminary here in Indianapolis. And I did a lot of weddings and funerals for people who didn't have a church home. And then
you were like the theater chaplain.
I was. And then AIDS.
You still are you? You're
sort of yeah.
Weddings.
Yeah. AIDS hit the theater community. And when that happened, Rick Simone, who's no longer among us, called me and asked me to visit a friend of his that I was acquainted with, but I didn't know him well because he was dying of AIDS. And the mother was keeping all his theater friends away because she blamed them for him being gay and having AIDS. So we became very close. And it was like, oh. So fast forward, for years, I did a lot of that and earned my living teaching college, acting, doing voiceover work, belly dancing, weddings and funerals, whatever I could to make a buck. And then I was doing Midsummer Night's Dream at IRT. 2 guys were dying of AIDS. A woman was dying of breast cancer. I hadn't been to see them during the rehearsal process. And I just got, and is this all there is kind of feeling? I thought there are a lot of people who want to be in my shoes on stage, but not a lot of people who are willing to sit with the sick and the dying. So I took a unit of something called clinical pastoral education, chose the farthest thing away from AIDS, high-risk maternity in the neonatal intensive care unit. And the first week I was there, it's like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. So that's what I did for 20-some years. I worked as a full-time hospital chaplain, mainly with dealing with infant loss.
Stephen, you've had a very, very interesting career, fascinating career, really. You've made a real impact. From where I sit, I know you've made a real impact, and not only the LGBT community, but the community at large. So talk about your career.
Sure. It's something you said too, Miki, just really quick to go back to that really quick. Being sober too allows you to be present enough to see when you see what your true purpose is, right? I think, which is what was really important to me, because that's when I got sober, my life just changed. So yeah, I started off my career as a music teacher for a couple of years. I actually taught choir and band. I went to IU for music education. But I got out of that, and teaching just wasn't right for me. I would say I was a pretty failed teacher. Wasn't all that great, but I did care for sure. And I loved art.
Did your drinking have a lot to do with that?
It may have had some to do with it. Yeah, I wasn't quite in my sort of full, addiction.
You were a functional alcoholic.
Yes, I was definitely functioning. Yeah, I was definitely functioning. But I got out of teaching and got into nonprofit work, and I worked for Music for All, Brains of America, for a number of years as an event coordinator, event manager, and then moved to the East Coast to follow a boyfriend. And out there, got some great, amazing opportunities in different development offices, fundraising out on the East Coast. I was working as a consultant, and so I was in the Corcoran Gallery of Art out there. I was in, some other associations and organizations that are right on Capitol Hill. So just great experience.
And bars nearby.
Yeah, well, for sure. No, yeah. And here I was on the East Coast with this boyfriend, and it wasn't working out. And I was miserable and lonely. And out in DC, like, I'm sure it's the same way here. Like, everybody had two jobs. You couldn't afford to live out there if you did, especially at my age, because I was relatively young at that point. But that's when I everything fell apart out there. I moved back to Indiana, and then that's when I got sober, and I got the job at the children's choir. So I was at the Indianapolis Children's Choir for a decade. And I always think, I was out there spinning the plates, making everything work while being drunk all the time, basically, before I got sober. So when I got sober, it was kind of easy to manage everything then, right? So, I worked my way up at the children's choir, had a great boss that helped me out, learned a lot about fundraising, even more about fundraising and marketing, and then left and worked for the Damien Center, a great organization in the city that does a lot of great work. I served as their vice president of fundraising, donor relations, and marketing there. Got a lot of experience with a large organization.
And I raised a whole lot of money.
There was it's such a
raise, exactly.
Oh,
you had a big team.
I did have a big team. I didn't do it by myself.
Regards on Stephen and his fundraising after arts administrator, and currently still he is a remarkable leader, and to fundraise to the level he has is no small feat.
Well, and I'm lucky though, right? Because I've just worked for organizations that are doing awesome work, and I'm passionate about, right? Like and I truly feel like I love philanthropy because, I think, these organizations need these resources, but what it does for the donor as well to get connected to that organization that way is just amazing. And as a fundraiser, and everything that I get to do in the arts, I'm grateful that I get to be part of those relationships and see that happen every day. So, but thank you, Tom. The Indianapolis Men's Chorus, who was an organization that I really loved and was part of, served on their board for a couple of years as well. They were looking for their first executive director, and I applied for the job and got it. And for me, it's a dream job because not only do I get to help, an organization grow that's an arts organization and be part of that, the Men's Course has this dual mission where we're also looking to develop inclusive community as well. And to be part of that and see that community grow, not only the community of singers, but also the community that surrounds it is amazing too. So,
Calvin, you came to we've crossed paths many, many, many times. And when we worked together at Channel 6, when we first met, and I'll tell a little bit about my story, but our connection there was through, our work together, particularly as I recall, you were involved in both the studio when I did all kinds of public affairs, directed public affairs stuff, but I think you were also involved on location for shoots that I did related to specials I produced. And I knew that we both had the theater common, In many ways, I sensed then, am I not correct, that it was kind of our first love, actually. And television was a job, really, that we really preferred the theater. But when I discovered a few years back that you started a company and that you presented material content related to alcoholism. To my knowledge, wasn't that the first of any such company?
Referring to Stage Door Productions?
Yeah, your Stage Door, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I started that around 2000.
And that's one of the big reasons I wanted you on this show, because of what you represent, from the standpoint of your recovery.
Yeah.
And how important that is to have an audience that oftentimes are people who need to be exposed to that material, like Dr.
Bill W. and Dr. Bob.
Dr. Bob, yes. Yeah. So tell us about your company.
Okay. Well, first off, can I explain that I did know you from Channel 6, like back in the late 70s. I worked from production from like 74 till 82, and then I moved into news production from 82 to 99 when I left. And I left because I found it increasingly hard to do any theater based on the schedules that they put me on. I was either on like a early morning shift or a late night shift. Mm-hmm. So I unfortunately had to leave there, and I hated leaving there because I loved it. It was like during the Howard Caldwell, Clyde Lee, D.I.L.S.
golden age of broadcasting.
Right. It was a great time.
To call channels is the country club station.
Yeah. I learned so much there. But so I was very fortunate that I transitioned to working for Marquis Rental and Staging, and they put me on a daytime job. I was a contractor down at Lilly. So I had nights and weekends free now. So that's what I was looking for. I now can finally start doing theater again. That was right around, I left Channel 6 in 99. So by, 2001, I was doing stuff again. But I didn't really actually form Stage Door Productions until about 2004. And one of the first pieces I did right out of the gate was called RFK Remembered. That didn't really have anything to do with alcoholism. That was just one of my great role models of all time was Robert Kennedy. Mm-hmm. So we did that at the Historical Society. But you know what? I didn't really start doing anything recovery-wise until about 2017. And I remember how this all started was I went to an intergroup meeting, and they had a DVD of the Bill W. and Dr. Bob show on the table there.
Tell our audience who don't know who you're talking about, who those guys are.
Yeah, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson and Bob Smith, the founders of the AA back in 1935. Mm-hmm. So there's a stage play written on them, and DVD was a production by New World Stages out of New York that was taped. And I remember watching that and just crying my eyes out. It was so moving. I was like, I got to do this someday. I got to do this. But then I'd always go to meetings, and it's like, I'll blow my anonymity if I do this. I'll blow my anonymity. So I was really reluctant to do anything for the longest time until I went to a meeting one time, and somebody said, there's a prayer out there called Dear Lord, and it ends with, I'm an alcoholic. I don't care who knows it, just as long as I don't forget it. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I heard that, it's like, okay, that's it. I'm going to do it. That's it. I don't care, So, yeah, we did it at Indie Fringe in 2017. Had a great cast, and we were sponsored by Kim Manlove through Indiana Addictions Issues Coalition.
Kim Manlove.
Kim Manlove, yeah.
His son, if I'm not mistaken, took his own life.
Right.
Yeah, tragic.
Yeah.
And his father has dedicated himself to the cause ever since.
Now, he's since left there. Somebody else has replaced him. Joni Miller has replaced him. So, you know what? We did it in 2017, and lo and behold, as luck would have it, Kathleen Gill from Fairbanks, she's retired now from Fairbanks, but Kathleen Gill was in the audience that day. And she sat on the idea of producing it again someday, and I got a call from both Kathleen Gill and Kim Manlove like around 2019. They said, guess what? The International Women's Conference is coming to Indianapolis in February of 2020, and we'd like to produce this show again and sponsor it. And we'll do 2 weeks at the District Theater, and then we'll do some shows at the Indiana Historical Society in conjunction with the festival, or not the festival, but the convention, the women's convention. So that's what we did.
Well,
And it was great. It was a great experience. We got it in like 2 weeks before COVID hit.
yeah.
We closed like late February, and then COVID hit March 13th. So we were extremely lucky to get it in. But that's what happened with that. And then after that was done, I got hooked. I was like, I got to do more pieces. That's all there is to it. And we produced Every Brilliant Thing after that, which is more of a show about depression and suicide.
Sure.
But how it affects families. But then last year we did People, Places, and Things at the district. And that's a dual addiction piece, really powerful piece by Duncan McMillan, the same guy that wrote Every Brilliant Thing. Really powerful piece. And I tried forever to get the rights for that, but they finally caved in and got him. And I thought it was a really good production.
Well, I've seen at least 3 of your productions, and, I'm a reviewer as well. They were just top notch. I was really proud of the work you did.
Thank you.
Because what a great way to expose people to recovery, and particularly artists, because you're a peer, right? And we're all peers to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we're all role models. And, I take ownership of that, but the most, hopefully, ego-less way.
Yeah.
It's a big responsibility, really. And we need people that we can look up to. And my story, it's all intertwined with all your stories. That's another reason I want you in particular to be here. Number one, Tim Lauder was my first sponsor. I worked on shows with him. And, when I hit bottom, and I'll tell you why I hit bottom, what's commonly known, most of us know this term. I had a couple of God shots.
Yeah.
So Tim, he always intrigued me, and so did you, Mickey. You were both people who are in the acting community. I was working with you at the Playhouse. And same with Tim. I think he did a couple shows that he directed. And I watched both of you from afar. I kept my distance from you all because you made me really uncomfortable. I knew that you were a fantastic artist, and I really respected that for you, but made me really uncomfortable being around because I knew that you were, quote, in recovery. And I thought, are they judging me? Do I have to be careful when I'm around them? I won't be able to drink as much as, if they're saying they're looking at me, we go to the rehearsals, right? And so I was like really intrigued. I was catching your every move. So when I show up in a meeting, who should I see but Tim Lauder walking in the room? And he was like kind of expressionless. Oh, hi, Tom. Just like, and I was like, I was just so disappointed that it's like he did make a fuss over me. I was just like business as usual. And I asked him, I said, Tim, why are we just you seem so indifferent? But I was like, well, Tom, thing I knew you were going to show up sooner or later.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was my first sponsor. He really, because he was an artist, and because he died of cancer, he went through so much, like many of us have in our lifetimes. He played an integral part, and you as well, because who took me to my first meeting but you?
I did. But then I took him to the Renaissance Festival afterwards. One of our dear friends was in it, but she performed in the beer tent.
Yes.
And so, I take him to this place where there's lots of beer and wine. And
yeah, my very first day of sobriety. My very first day is like...
But we didn't drink, did we?
No.
And we had fun.
No. I was a baby. I couldn't believe, why would she bring me here? I was alcohol everywhere. Anyway, I look back on that. It was just really fun. But what brought me to my knees was... I was just, before I got here to the studio, I happened to be and you should remember Greg Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Greg Williams is a photographer, editor at Channel 6, and 3 of my projects, we collaborated together. He shot and edited, and I wrote and directed and all. So we've come back together. We're going to be producing a documentary. That's the whole story. And I haven't done a documentary for since the late 90s, piece about James Dean and me. Well, this documentary we're doing is about a young country western artist that I took under my wing, and he died from an brain tumor at the age of 33. And it was devastating to me. But since then, I decided to turn something so horribly negative into something positive and tell his life story. So Greg came into my life coincidentally, and he's got a production company he's had for 35 years, very successful. So he's going to be shooting it. That's great. So we were just together. We reminisced about a show that we did that actually led me indirectly into recovery. I produced a documentary at Channel 6. You may remember, you may have worked with us as a group or or sound, and it was a show about drunk driving.
Okay. Was that the one with Norm Graham in it? Was he in it?
I think, no, that...
He was in A Woman's Story.
Yeah, he was in a...
Okay. Is that what that was? Okay.
Yeah. So what happened with this drunk driving documentary, we interviewed... And by the way, I looked at that show recently. A whole lot hasn't changed. People are still out there drunk driving. The laws have gotten a little stricter. But basically, you look at this show, and the shelf life is still, Anyway, so during the production of this, I was out there interviewing mothers, family members, and people, kids, senior daughters who were killed in drunk driving accidents. And one in particular was a young man who, after a soccer game, had way too much to drink, and he woke up to find police standing over his bed, and they arrested him because he killed a girl who was walking on the sidewalk on the street, and he was in a blackout. So interviewing this guy and the parents of their only son who was killed like a mile away from their farmhouse, and they woke up here. All these dramatic stories. And here I was out there driving drunk, and I'd be talking to these people, and I would still be hungover from the night before. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that was God's providence that of all the producers, they would assign us things. I didn't choose that.
Yeah.
And the last person who had chosen to do that, knowing what I knew. So it's indirectly, my TV career exposed me to the issue. And then after a year, it took a year for me to finally get honest about it because, and my solution to not driving drunk after that was just to stay home and start drinking by myself, which became my life, a little while. We've all been there. So I don't think my story is any more unique because, there is, as we all say, reaching the bottom is different for everybody. And there are people, and what is it we used to say, or you used to hear, people who are, they're worse drunks than others. And there's a term we use.
Well, it doesn't...
Level of alcoholism.
It doesn't matter how much you drink, what you drink. It's what happens to you when you drink. Do you lose control? Do you feel remorse? Do you black out? Do you make bad choices?
You'll all relate to this and identify with them. I want to hear some more of your coach stories because actually a lot of living in addiction, it's really quite comical. Some of the things that we've done.
Well, Patti LaBelle once told me I was doing a show at the Black Curtain, and it was before I was 21, but I was quite a drinker. And we were doing the play, The Desk Set. Mm-hmm. And she told me I was the only person she knew that could play a drunk. And I kind of took pride in that.
Yeah. You've done some research.
I've done lots of research.
How about you, Kevin? Do you have any stories about your drinking and stage work?
No, not really. No, I never did a show drunk, thank God. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I would show up for rehearsals drunk, but thank God, at least I respected the director and the rest of the cast enough not to do that.
Right.
But what's to say that wouldn't have continued? I'm reading a book right now on an actor that I revere a lot, John Barrymore. And he's a fascinating story about his life. But he got to the point where he'd show up for performances drunk and he couldn't remember his lines. But people kept casting him because he was such a brilliant actor. But no, thank God I never got to that point. Yeah.
Stephen, did your addiction ever interfere with your artistic stuff that you did?
Oh, yeah, I definitely. I think when I was in my addiction, I didn't think it did, but like looking back at it, well, and the other thing is, Tom knows me from when I first came in.
I believe I was at your first meeting.
Yeah, and the way that you tell this story, I could barely walk in. I don't know if I remember things exactly like that, but I.
You were trapped. It's like, oh, that poor time. Here, let me help you. I mean, you were miserable.
No, but yeah, and I think when I look back when I start, looking back and remembering,
the transformation is mind-boggling from what I knew then.
Yeah.
What? So you're practically a poster boy.
That's great. Yeah. So
I think we all agree that what's responsible for that? People don't like to talk about spirituality, and we're not talking about.
I do.
Well, what I meant by that is that we've learned how to separate religion from spirituality, and that you're given a choice about what you can believe in, but it's important that you believe in something outside yourself, right?
Yeah.
And spirituality, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to discuss it. It's too personal. Well, it is loaded for some people. And these days you have to be careful about who you talk to about that.
Yeah.
Well,
the cynicism is so ingrained.
Well, I heard a quote a long time ago. It said, coincidence is a miracle where God remains anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think there have been lots of things that have happened in my life, and I could either say, it was fate, or it was a blessing, or it was God. But no matter how you choose to look at it, I think sometimes, life happens. I don't believe in a God who's pulling the strings, and we're not marionettes, but I believe we all have choices. And I think sometimes to be able to choose good and to choose hope over fear. I heard a country western song on the way here, and Jelly Roll, who's a man who's in recovery, and it's I'm a lost cause. Yeah. And there's a song about I'm a lost cause.
Wow.
And it's I'm beyond repair. The smoking and drinking and all these things. And, it's like you can either choose to live in fear, and it's this downward spiral that just keeps digging you deeper, or you can cling to something, to hope. Maybe hang out with somebody that has something you want. And that's why I think, part of the thing why the program works, because if we saw a bunch of sad sacks who were in financial problems, who didn't have healthy relationships with people who were stingy or not generous, we wouldn't want to be like them. But people, I think, who live sober lives, live lives that, do have purpose, that they are giving people, that they're honest people, that they are helpful people.
That's just it. We're useful members of society now, where in the past we weren't of it and used to anyone, not even ourselves.
Stephen, how has spirituality been a force in your recovery?
Well, I mean, it's how it began. For me, and I don't know if this happens to everybody, but there was a moment, there was a spiritual awakening. There was a moment in time where, I was sitting there on the couch just drunk. I was watching The Color Purple, actually, which is one of my favorite movies. But but now that movie has this connotation to it. But I was watching it repeat. And I would just wake up for a couple minutes and then I'd fall back to sleep. And then I wake up just in this sort of drunken, I'd wake up just enough to drink some more and pass out again. And then I just got to a point, and I had been building up to this, but where I was just like, I give up. I'm done with this. I want better for myself. And if whoever, the universe or whatever, they snagged onto that, whoever that is, whatever that is, immediately. And the first person that popped into my head was a friend of mine named Jonette. And I called him and I said, you know what? I'm done with this now. I can't do this anymore. And he said, well, my friend Mark St. John's on the board for Fairbanks. I mean, just an immediate connection. And then he came and picked me up and I, and the crazy thing is, I didn't drink for probably 12 hours before I went to Fairbanks, and I still blew at 0.25 on their alcohol thing. I mean, I was drunk all the time. And I didn't even know it. Every time I drove, I was drunk, right? Like yeah. But and I love Fairbanks and honestly, I wouldn't mind going back. I mean, I don't want to go back out and drink again, but I would go back and recover again because I love the food there. Food anytime you want it, right? But there was
something. I worked in development there for years. I told the story about, it was ironic. I'm working in a treatment facility. But food was an issue for all the administrative people.
Oh, really?
We all ate in that cafeteria. It was low with carbohydrates.
Yeah.
To fatten up the addicts and alcoholics. I gained 30 pounds and I became
Yeah. Well, I've been to the Marion County lockup a couple times. And let me tell you, the food is not so...
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't like this.
How about you? How does spirituality play a part in your life?
Well, I didn't have that burning bush thing like, Bill W. had in the play. Mine was more gradual over time. And I think what happened to me is I suddenly realized people were cooperating with me, that people hadn't cooperated with me in a long time. And I think I finally realized that was because my attitude had changed. That's what the program does to us. It's a personality change. That's the spiritual experience. Yeah, so that was the first thing I noticed. Because at work I used to walk down the hallway and people used to not want to make eye contact with me. They wanted to look at the floor because there must have been something on my face that they didn't like seeing. I don't know what it was, but I don't get that now. People are so open to me that didn't used to be open to me in the past. And that's because my attitude has changed toward everything. And that's a blessing in itself. But
that's the thing that's always fascinating me about recovery. I've always been a big fan of transformations. That's why I love theater so much. You see people transform, their whole demeanor or facade or whatever. What's the name of the play? Pygmalion, which became My Fair Lady. I love that story of transformation.
Yeah.
And how that happens. So it's like the miracle. This person who used to be angry and aggressive and just really not a very good person becomes just gentle, sweet, kind. I mean, doesn't that fascinate you? About the people that we know who maintain their sobriety. And it's truly walking miracle. And you see, and you can't explain that. You can't explain it other than something not worldly. It truly is. And I think that's the core of it. You want to hear my spiritual awakening? So Kevin, I used to have the morning shift. And what you said, she reminded me that
I did too.
Every morning I would come up and I was still drunk from the night before. I only got maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep.
I can relate to that.
Sometimes I'd have to come to the station and sleep on the floor of my office because I couldn't get late, because if I wasn't there, the station would go on the air. And actually that happened a couple of times, and it was a nightmare. I would be called on the carpet, And, they'd let me get away with it. They were great enablers that way. So I would get off at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and I would go home, and I loved All My Children, the soap opera. And I was like an addict, I had to see All My Children every day. So I was sitting there one day, and one of my favorite characters was Devin. And Devin had become an alcoholic. So she was like a mess. And I'm sitting there with my scotch or my wine or my beer, I don't know, it didn't matter at that point, smoking a joint, watching All My Children and thinking, oh, that poor Devin, I hope she gets... Finally, one day, it occurred to me, Tom, get it together, man. This is you. I mean, why? It's like, I was the denial.
Sure. Yeah.
It's very powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when you can overcome that paradigm, it's just, oh, God, I can't describe it.
Even at one point, because Tom knows I went back out for about 10 years.
Can I tell a story?
Sure.
I was really pissed off at her for a really long time because she took me to my first meeting. Then we go to lunch, and she has a glass of wine.
And I thought 7 years later.
And I thought, what the beep is she doing? I look up to this person. And so everything I've been doing, it's been a lie. I was young. I was still very judgmental, and that it was all ego driven. But I wasn't even concerned about you. But once I came to my senses, I realized I was really worried about you. And when you came back, it was a great lesson for me.
I think it was pride. Pride was one of the things that kept me from coming back. Mm-hmm. Because I was ashamed. There were people in the theater who knew that I was sober, and then they would see me out drinking and behaving inappropriately. And sometimes Mary Atkins said a few things to me. Yeah. God love her. She directed Bill and Dr. Bob the first time Theater on the Square produced it. I think it was in the early 80s.
Yes.
And
for those who don't, Mary Atkins, she was like the Helen Hayes of Indianapolis, one of the actors that everyone revered.
Yeah.
She was so talented. Her daughter also, Anne. I don't know if you work with Anne or knew Anne. But, we have some great role models in the theater community. If you remember.
One of the things that hit me when I finally got sober, there were all these little God moments. I was miserable. I lived next door to a friend. He and his partner, the partner was dying of AIDS. One night, the guys came over for dinner, and one guy brought 2 bottles of wine, one for me while I was cooking and one for dinner. And Jeff had to go to the hospital that night, and I was too drunk to go and support them. And then something else happened. Then I had a neighbor over for lunch, and I told her, it's like, well, what do you want to drink? This is lunch. Beer, wine, or I have Stoli in the freezer. And she goes, I'll just have water. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And she usually didn't announce that to people. Then I had a date with a guy who was in the program. And so I called the Greek Islands restaurant where he was taking me for dinner and said, don't bring a bottle of Roditis to the table when I walk in because I'm out with this guy who doesn't drink. And after our date, we'd had a wonderful date. He'd been very respectful. We went for a walk on the canal. It was lovely. And after he left, I celebrated having this good sober date by getting drunk. Another day goes by. A guy
that's beautiful.
that I had done his wedding. He was a big drinker. I saw him one day he was riding behind me on his motorcycle, long hair blowing in the breeze. And I thought, I'm going to wave him over and he can come over. He wanted to see my little house, have him see my little house and have a beer or whatever. And I didn't. The next morning I got a call that he had died in a drunken motorcycle accident.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that's what took me to my first meeting. It wasn't for me so much as thinking I could have had something to do with his death. So it was,
Wow.
it was more of that, because God said, Miki, you're not humble enough to, do it, or you don't believe in yourself enough to do it for you. But maybe the thought that you could have harmed somebody.
Sure.
So, Kelvin and Stephen, did your getting sober have anything to do with the image that you wanted to project? And I'll tell you, I'll give you my example. I wasn't so much worried about killing myself or somebody. I was worried about my job, which probably wasn't the best reason to get sober, but I was afraid that if my name got in the papers, it would be embarrassing. I'm sure I'd lose my job. But it was completely the wrong reason. So, did you feel any of that kind of, when you got sober, what were your primary fears? What would happen when people knew?
Yeah, I think in the moment when I kind of decided that it was enough, not so much, but I had lost a job because of my drinking when I was out in D.C.
Men identify with what they do.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that was really hard.
I'm more than what I do, more than my job.
Yeah. You kind of define yourself, according to what your job. And that was really tough. And there was some denial there too, I think, because because they didn't say, oh, well, you showed up drunk or you're drunk. I don't think they even really knew. It was like my work was just suffering. It really was. It wasn't in the arts. It was a different organization. But I was in that phase then where I was getting up in the morning and I don't know why I was drinking. I was in a weird situation. I did have a lot of money. So I was drinking like the Dark Eyes and all that stuff, bottom shelf. And I lived in Maryland where, they sort of separate everything. So if you want liquor, you have to go to a specific state-run place, right, to get your liquor. And I'd go and buy the cheapest stuff I could. But then I'd run out of that.
Cheap stuff?
Yeah, it's changed now probably for you. Yeah.
Oh, God. That's what I used to.
And there's Burnett's. I drink that too. That was pretty low on the total poll. But if it was really good and kind to myself, I'd get the cherry flavored Burnett's.
Oh.
So, but and then you had to go to so for wine and beer, they have those everywhere. You could buy wine and beer. That wasn't such a wine and beer place, but there was a wine and beer person. But I'd drink it if I had to, right? And so I would get up in the morning and I'd have a beer just to settle my.
Did you ever drink somebody's leftover drink?
Oh my gosh!
Have
yes,
a cigarette butt in it.
God, you know what? Here's because my husband is not an alcoholic, right? And he rarely drinks, but he'll sometimes drink, and he will drink the whole glass. And every time I think, what in the world? Why is he not finishing this glass of alcohol? Yeah, he paid good money for that.
That's a phenomenon to some people.
Yeah, I still can't believe that.
But I bet you don't think anything of it when he eats half of a baked potato.
Not at all. Not at all. That's totally fine. Yeah.
Kelvin, that happened to you in terms of why some of the reasons you quit drinking?
Oh, you know what?
For the wrong reasons like I did, ultimately.
No, you know what? Honestly, I think my marriage saved my life. Was what happened with me. That was my case. I got engaged in 2000. We were supposed to get married in 2001. And I knew I was an alcoholic that whole time we were engaged. But being a typical alcoholic, my solution was to do absolutely nothing about it. I was going to deal with this issue when I had to. And that came up in a month after we were married. I had my first DUI arrest. And then I had another one 6 months later. And she was really making me seriously look at my problem and urging me to get into AA meetings. And I did. I started going to meetings for a while and got a sponsor, but that was 2001. But my sobriety date's not until 2003.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how long's everybody been sober?
21 years now in January.
2008.
October 20th, 1995.
Wow, that's great.
We're not coming up on 39.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
There's a play, The 39 Steps, but I don't think.
Oh,
Anyway.
let's talk about one of the things that was really hard for me to get sober was I felt, the peer pressure and the peer pressure as it relates to, I believe that there is a subculture related to alcohol in the theater.
Oh, yeah.
At least, the reward system that you go drink and talk about the play after the party, and there are opening night parties, and the social part of it.
I had to leave the theater, a theater that has a professional production companies, sometimes serves champagne opening night. And I was bothered. I mean, something triggered me in a show. And as soon as that show was over, I lit out of there like a bat out of hell because I didn't want to be around alcohol. It's like I've been sober 27 years. But I know that now. When I got sober this time, third day sober, I'm at a bar to hear a band. I'm with some other people. A theater person is there. She comes over to me with vodka on the rocks with 3 olives and says, "You taught me to drink like."
Oh my gosh.
And because I love to drink solely on the rocks with 3 olives. And she remembers that story, which a friend of mine, I got a call from her dad that day saying she was going into hospice. Would I do her funeral when she died? So the next month, 3 of us kind of took turns spending the night with her. And that helped keep me sober the first month because I needed to be sober.
Speaking of opening nights, Kevin, you mentioned that I was all in theater, but in reality, I was one of the founders of Weeks Theater. Brian and I were very close, and he asked me to be a part of the original board. So I was there, and he pitched it in someone's house in the living room, which to this day, when I walk into the present theater, it makes you so grateful that I experienced the continuum of what's possible in the arts. That's why I appreciate so much what you've done, because I've been there. Stephen, you started 2 companies, the Pride Band and
I saw them last summer.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, good.
And Miki, you've been involved in your share of, they could be called startups. So anyway, possibility teaches you possibility. Anything can happen if you get the right team together. So opening night at this Phoenix Theater, their first location, our first location, which
was it Warp?
The Ambassador.
Was Warp the first play?
So I'm their board member, and so I'm like helping them paint the lobby the opening night, right? Red. And I've been assigned to take care of the party afterwards. So there I am before intermission, filling like 100 champagne glasses, and I can't do this. I'm not going to be. This is not going to work. I resigned from the board the following couple of weeks. I mean, it's something I knew that was going to be. It was going to be the peer thing, because there's a lot of peer pressure, and that's what I want to address to you. We're getting near the tail end, but share your message of hope to those who may be listening. It doesn't matter if they're artists, but I hope artists will relate to us because we're peers. What's your message to these folks? Can you give them some hope based on your experience? Experience strengthens hope is what we look for.
You don't have to be miserable. There's another choice. And, I typically, I stay away from situations where I know there's going to be a lot of drinking or where the purpose is drinking, like when people have a beer bash or, kinds of things. I do not go because that's kind of the focus.
We learn not to go to places
that are slippery. Yeah. And
unless we have a reason to go there.
right. And
Or wherever.
oftentimes I'll take somebody with me who's in recovery.
I'm sure.
Drive your own car so you can leave. Have an escape route, and, sometimes I've had people who kind of needle me and say, well, I guess I value my life too much because if I drink again, it will kill me.
People think that's dramatic.
No, it's true.
Some people consider that to be, isn't that a little dramatic?
No,
Not even a little sad.
no.
No.
It's like what? A thimble full is too much and a swimming pool full is not enough.
I like to tell people, I drink more than your whole neighborhood. So you don't want to be around.
I don't have a drinking problem. I drink, I fall down, I get drunk, no problem.
Stephen, what message can you give to folks?
I mean, you hit it on the head. You don't have to be miserable. You just don't. And just comment, and my sobriety compared to everybody else in this room is young, but even after 15 years, I do all those same things. With just making sure that I'm in a safe place and that I've got plans and all that stuff. Because in fundraising, and Tom knows this too, like so many meetings happen and there's alcohol around all the time. And, if I'm meeting with a donor, I may try to show up early so I can get my Diet Coke, right? So I'm set with my drink. And I do that a lot at parties too. I get a non-alcoholic drink right at the beginning and I carry that around, right?
Yeah.
I know that I have a way out. I also know the exact moment when the party turns from a normal party to a drunk party, right? Like there's a moment in time when that happens. And I know that's time for me to leave at that point, right? And nobody's going to remember at that point if I left or not. So, but yeah, you don't have to be miserable. There's a way out there. Yes, if I drink again, even after 15 years, I know for sure that it would ruin my life. There's no question about it. I used that tool for years, and alcohol worked on some level, but then it made my life miserable. And I know if I go back and use that tool again, it's going to take me right where I was. I'm going to start right back where I was laying on that couch. Like I'm going to be right back there. It's going to take it all away from me. But the hope is that I'm such a much happier person on a day-to-day basis. I'm grateful for the things in my life. I have a wonderful husband. I have a community that surrounds me. I have a great best friend and I have great friends as well. But I have a great life. I get to do what I love every single day of my life. And it's just great. So
I'm thinking along similar lines. Being in a sober state of mind and body allows me the freedom to pursue anything creative that I want to do these days. If I pick up a drink, all bets are off. I'm sitting on the couch at home, no motivation whatsoever. That's my priority. So I'm very blessed. But my hope is that I live another 11 years at least. How am I going to do that? By not drinking, because my long-term goal is, I don't know if some of you have heard or not, but they're going to announce it real shortly. The city of Indianapolis is sponsoring the 2035 International Men and Women's Convention. It's going to be at the Lucas Oil Stadium, 2035.
Wow.
So my intent is, I'm going to be way too old to play Bill W. at that point. So my intent is I want to direct a production of it, of Bill W. and Dr. Bob in conjunction with the convention. That's my long-term goal. And like I say, the only way I'm going to get there is not die and not drink. So
do you consider yourself a role model? Any of you? Do you think that's a noble calling, though, to be a good example?
In religion, sometimes people would say, you may be the only Bible that some people will ever read. And I think sometimes I want to live my life in such a way that, if somebody's out there like Tom was a long time ago, if there's somebody out there who wants to get sober, I've lived my sobriety out loud enough that somebody's going to go, I can talk to Miki,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tom.
Good day to be sober, that's for sure.
If you're struggling with addiction or substance abuse, to get help, reach out to a clergy member, a licensed therapist, a treatment center, or contact Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and other sobriety groups.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.